All right, let's go ahead and take a look at our next question here. Question C. So, consider the following code segment. Int counter equals 0. Start with the variable x and dealing with another one over here. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it just yet. Let's see what the question is asking me. How many times will the statement in line 6 be executed as a result of running the code segment? And our line 6 is here where it says counter. So let's take a look and see, sort of like what we did the other questions. And I'm going to start by creating some variables over here that we're going to have to use. So counter is one, x is another one, and y is another one. And we can start counter at 0, just initially from looking at this line up here. And then we can look, and we can start with our first for loop. So x is equal to 10. And our for loop is running while x is greater than 0. So, and we're decrementing by 1. So sort of like what we've done in a couple warm-ups ago, we're going downwards instead of upwards. That's what we're doing here. And so we should be running just about, let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we should be running 10 times in this case. So this will run 10 times. All right, and then the next one here is y is equal to x. Y is less than or equal to x. Y plus plus. So let's take a look and let's start with this next loop in here. And reminder, anytime we have a loop inside of this loop, this first loop has to finish before we can increment this next one up here. So the original one we were in. So this one has to terminate first before we can go back to that original one. So let's take a look here. Y is equal to x. So now we're going to set y equal to 10. We're going to loop while y is less than or equal to 10, y plus plus. So in this case, I'm going to run. It's going to go inside because 10 is less than or equal to 10, technically. And now I'm going to go inside here, and I'm going to increment my counter by 1. And so now counter is 1. And then this is going to loop again one more time, which is now going to set y, which is 11 because I've incremented. Is 11 less than or equal to 10? It's not. So our inner for loop is done. Because we incremented y. It was originally 10. Now it's 11 because we incremented. And it's no longer true. So counter is done. So this inner for loop is done. Technically my y disappears now. And I go back to this outer for loop that deals with x. And now I decrement it to be 9. And 9 is greater than 0. So I'm going to go inside the for loop. And now I'm going to do the inner for loop yet again. So I'm going to set y equal to whatever x is, which is 9. And then I'm going to check, is y, which is 9, less than or equal to whatever x is, which is 9, y plus plus. So I'm going to do the inner part right here, which is counter plus 1. And now I'm going to increment, when this runs, I'm going to increment my y to no longer be 9, and now it's 10, which makes this no longer true. At this point, you should maybe see a trend here. It looks like the inner for loop is only running once, and then every time it increments, it just terminates and it doesn't keep doing. Which means that no matter what our x is, our inner for loop is just going to increment once. So that means this counter is just going to increment once. So this for loop is essentially useless. It's not doing anything. All it's doing is running the code that we would be running normally every time it loops. It's just running it once. So in this case, you could keep going up until x is 0, and the outer for loop is going to finish. But if we know that that's a trend and that's what's happening here, then we know that counter is going to just keep going up as our loop goes through, And because our outer loop is running 10 times, our counter is going to increment up to 10, which leaves our final answer here to be C, which is 10. So that's a good and easy way of you sort of testing it out a couple times, and then you see that there's a trend that's happening again. You see that that inner for loop is just running one time, which means that it's just doing the code the way it normally would be running a for loop, which is executing it one time before it loops again. And so we can generalize and say X is decrementing and it's running 10 times. So that means our counter is going to be incremented all the way up to 10, and it's also running only 10 times. So I hope that was helpful, and I hope that makes it a little bit clearer.